Hello, Myrto, and welcome to this short-term, high-impact discussion. Would you like to tell us a few words about who you are?
Hello, thank you very much for the invitation. The initial research part was very interesting and challenging intellectually, but rewarding as well. Well, I am an architect initially, and then I did a PhD on birth spaces and a postdoctoral research on birth centers and the form they have in Greece. So well, this year I worked at the university. I taught at the university a course about the design of birth centers, which was exactly what I feel I know how to do, and I think it had some very good results, judging the design of the students.
Which university?
Of Thessaly, University of Thessaly in Volos, central Greece.
Great. So you started making a very interesting impact by supporting young architects or professionals interested in the field to turn their attention to this public space, which is so much connected with the health of present and future generations, the mothers birthing and the children being born. So thank you for doing that, Myrto.
Thanks for saying that. I was very happy as well because I think the students were excited. It was a very different kind of project. They usually design public buildings like, well, not hospitals, but maybe libraries and sometimes schools, but nothing that concerns this sort of start of life.
Yeah. And we all know how important this can be for the rest of the life of the people involved. So, Myrto, what was it that made you move from the general field of architecture to the classical or conventional way of looking at buildings and spaces and making them nice places for people to live? What was it that moved your attention from that to birthing spaces?
My own experiences. Actually, it was the idea that architecture is not just a nice form, something nice to look at. It's the spaces we live in. And because we live in them, our life interacts with them, which means that we have to design them based on our own experiences. They will impact our experiences, will affect our experiences, and in the other way around, in a way, the way we think about architecture will affect the way we design it. And this was my influence from the UK, where I did part of my studies, where they always focused on experience. Unlike in Greece, where they used the focus on form and later on theory. So this is the idea how these two interact, one's actually lived experiences with built space.
Would you feel comfortable to share what kind of personal experience was one, at least, of the triggering motives, forces behind your growing interest, which resulted in a PhD and a third level education on birthing spaces and architecture and so on, your books and so on?
Yeah, it was this question, why, well, I had the birth experience in a conventional hospital, and then I started wondering and talking to people what I could do differently. And I found out that in order for things to change at maternity care and women's experiences, and you have to change not just what midwives and doctors do, you have to change the environment. And this was like a very big issue with the natural health, natural birth movement. And they found this out after spending years of trying to change the maternity care, not status, the conventions they use. They discovered that they will not change unless we change the spaces themselves, and specifically by building birth centers.
Right. So, what made you go to Italy and your colleague Nicoletta Settola there? Perhaps you can tell us more about her as well and her work, and study or learn or exchange knowledge with her and her team.
I had come into contact with Nicoletta Settola a few years ago in the previous research program, the previous COAST program, and she was I thought at the time she was the only architect at the university that was specifically interested in birth spaces and doing and teaching courses about that. So it was like, yes, this is the person for me. And I had read a couple of publications by her, and one that was very impressive or very important was about some factors of birth spaces that influence the birth experiences and how women interact with the space, the 8 building spaces impact on birth. And I think she has written some other articles as well, which were also very interesting. So not knowing about anybody else that is really working on this field, I decided to approach Nicoletta Settola.
Do you feel comfortable to share with us anything you remember from that first impressions of these factors you read about? Do you remember what were they even drafted?
Well, yes, some were pretty impressive, and the one that I used in the course that I taught last year was the importance of having a common space, a social space, she called it, because I have a positive, pleasant, and happy birth experiences. You need privacy most of all, but you also need to have a social space. Nicoletta Settola called it a social space, which is where mothers or mothers-to-be can meet each other. They can meet other people of their family. They can have, a snack, a coffee, or a break, and feel as if they have a normal life experience and enjoy it. And I think it was very impressive for me. And well, there were other factors like the use of art in birthing spaces, the importance of privacy, which is can be achieved through various architectural means. Some examples they showed me this. In this collaboration were very important. For example, how you open the door and other details. And this was very interesting because it's very specific and very architectural. It was exactly what I needed. And let me remember something else. The flexibility in the birthing space, that you need to design it so that the mother can adapt it to her needs. It mustn't be a large, stable bed in the middle of the room. That does not offer any flexibility for movement, because movement is very essential. So she showed me, Nicolette and her team showed me some examples of how they can they had converted, in collaboration with the hospital, a conventional birthing space and a conventional maternity clinic, how they converted the space. They tore down some walls, changed the position of the furniture, they changed the colors and the materials and the position of the midwife's desk to make it more friendly and more flexible, so that mothers can feel as if it's their own space. They do not feel alienated like in the conventional hospital. They felt like they were at home. Oh, another factor which was also very important for me to know is the midwife's desk, which is Nicoletta called it the midwife's hub, because this is where action is concentrated in the maternity clinic. Midwives come and go, mothers come and go, and ask questions. Fathers may also ask questions. So having done a kind of diagrammatic analysis of the movements in this activity, and they decided to place it in the center of the maternity clinic so that it can be both visible, accessible by parents and their helpers, and midwives can see what goes on in the birthing rooms. So it's not, you can't position a midwife's desk at the end of the maternity facility. It will be useless. So they change the position and make it more kind of circular, so they can have these results. This is part of what I learned in that collaboration.
Great. That's amazing that you bring this to Greece, and to perhaps we can see something of this being implemented in our country, perhaps more countries in the future. So, while you had this collaboration, how did you progress? What was it that at the end of this short-term collaboration, how were you enriched? You had discovered something, you had studied, you were inspired, you worked with the team and her personally, and then at the end of this short-term collaboration, what was there for you that did not exist before this collaboration?
I think it covered a need I had to discover why why spatial design can affect women negatively. And because of my PhD and postdoc research, which was in Greece, and mainly in Volos, the PhD, I used this method Nicoletta had, the 8 building spaces analysis, and on my own, not my own spaces, the spaces I had investigated in this town in Volos. So step by step, I described and showed that to Nicolette and her team as well, and kept it for myself, obviously, how these 8 building spaces analysis can be applied on each specific space in the clinic I had studied, the 2 hospitals I had studied. And this made it clear. For example, my conclusion from birth in the hospital of Volos and the private clinic of Volos was that most births were both interventive and traumatic. And I found out that there was no social space where mothers and fathers and the other helpers can interact. There was no privacy. Well, I did like a scale, and there was no privacy in any of those spaces. There was no natural elements or elements from art to give a pleasant atmosphere. And well, many of the other factors that Nicoletta mentioned did not exist there or had negative points. So that was very useful to me. There was a very systematic analysis of what I had already found out, and I really needed to see how it can be more analytic, more systematic, not just general and words about the atmosphere, but very specific, something you can measure, very specific objective observations. And that was the most important thing I learned, I think. And of course, these tools are still available to me. And the other impact it had on me, at least, was that I could teach this design course on the design of birth spaces with more confidence, with more tools how to do it correctly, and not be just, general and inconclusive and abstract. And I also invited Nicoletta with a Zoom or Skype meeting to talk to the students for about an hour and a half or so, and she showed many examples which were very useful for the course. She did part of my work for me. For example, she talked about the Margherita Birth Center designed by Bianca Lepori in Italy. And because it was very, very special building. Most buildings are, like rectangular and all that, and straight. This was a circular building, and the interior was also designed in a very particular way, very different to all others. And this influenced some of the students in my course, and did try to do something similar. Actually, most of them tried to do something circular.
Right.
See. Yes, well, it makes sense because you think about pregnancy, you think about one's belly, you think about the women and birth, and this has these connotations of softness and curves. But this particular building in Italy, the Margherita Birth Center, was a very clear example of this. Obviously, the other rectangular buildings can work just as well, or at least quite well. But I think it was very, very helpful for me and very eye-opening for the students, I think.
Right. So actually, you managed to translate the knowledge into a module, an educational, inspirational module for your students. And perhaps the next step would be to see one of your students, if not you, go the next step and design and actually build such a birthing space anytime soon, hopefully in the future.
Well, I have been approached by an entrepreneurial group to take part in the design, but this is not clear as yet what exactly I will be I'll be allowed to do there, like do design, have some consultations, give some directions. This is very unclear. I'm pretty clear about how I could organize that with the knowledge I have and the kind of directions I could give. But it's a bit ambitious, designing a birth center with all these factors in mind. Most people think about the furnishing and the materials. But anyway, we will see.
Yeah, I hope that we will see, and we'll see it in a good direction. Actually, you speak about a change that is innovative and reflects an attitude, a change in attitude, moving from the so far medical people focused birthing space to a mother-baby focused birthing space. And this is the most important impact that is being made out of this.
Yes, well, if we go step by step, we might, what's the word? Not, so I forget. Sorry, I forgot that. Might manage to make some changes, because if all these changes are made, it will have the direction of our society will have to change, the focus of our society. If you give priorities to freedom and women and the needs of children, well, it's not exactly how our society works.
Yes.
Our priorities. It will have to be turned, our values will have to be turned upside down. Well, not our values, the way we think and they operate in everyday life. Because in Greece specifically, the medicalization of birth is unbelievable, with the 70% cesarean rates and 100% cesarean rates for a smaller group, disabled women, who are not, kind of allowed to give birth at all, or give birth naturally. It's not even discussed. So this is very difficult to change. People, it's kind of entrenched. People are brought up this way, and if there's another example like a birth center, you cannot make a change.
Well, actually, you have started this, and this is what pioneers do, and you seem to be one of the pioneers in the hybrid discipline of birthing, medicine, obstetrics, midwifery, and architecture, and that is very important. Thank you very much for doing that, Myrto, for all of us.
I have the most common hybrid profession, being a mother.
In what ways? Would you like to say a little bit more about
Uh,
this?
yeah, well, I was an architect. I trained as an architect, but then I found out that being a mother is more important, and that's why I became interested in birth spaces and how birth interacts with space.
How many children have you got, Myrto?
Three, three.
3 children. Right, wonderful. So, Myrto, what remains to be done now? Are there any gaps that have come up to the surface exactly because you expanded this field of research?
You mean in the research? Yeah.
In the research, in the implementation, in the knowledge, whatever, what remains to be done. I guess that there is an important gap. How can these decision makers and policy makers who stakeholders in the birthing spaces, maternity, clinics or hospitals, etc., needed to learn about this and integrate. What remains to be done? We know now that space is important, and we know that there is a way that it can happen, it can be organized so that it responds to the new needs. So what remains to be done?
I think there's a lot of knowledge and lots of research on why space is important, what kind of space we need, and how it should be designed. So the problem is the implementation. And the gaps there, like you said, is first of all for people who make decisions to understand why this is important, and then what changes they can make and how. So there's several steps to be taken. I'm not sure people like, well, stakeholders or decision makers like politicians or the ones, the people who have the money, want to know about that.
You think so? They don't want to know about
I
that.
don't think they want to know. I think they're very satisfied with the way things work. For example, doctors, obstetricians, well, as a group in general, not every one of them, make a lot of money with the maternity system in Greece. They do a lot of interventions which they believe, I'm sure they believe they are necessary and they're useful, but not all of them. And they don't examine the impact of the birth experience has on. Actually, I really believe they don't know the impact of the birth experience on the mother and the baby. I have not seen that talked about by doctors in general, except for very, very few exceptions. So that's a huge gap, but I have no idea how it can be covered, because it has to do with medical education, has to do with society and how our values and beliefs about women, about women's bodies, about reproductions, about motherhood. So it's a very broad field. I can only contribute to the design of birth spaces and
Yes.
activism, of course, but this is a private, personal issue.
Yeah. So if we go to the messages that you would like to pass or send out using this interview here, what would your message be to policymakers? Since we just talked about the politicians and policymakers.
I think that they could make use of the fact that the healthier, easier, and more and happier births have a positive impact on the economy. But I'm not sure this is what concerns our policymakers nowadays. Because if you have a natural birth, women are healthier, babies are healthier, they don't burden the health system so much, and they're happier. Maybe that's the key. I'm not sure policymakers want people to be happier.
That is very sad to even to think about.
Judging what has happened the last 5 years. So I really don't know what can be done. The only thing I truly believe is possible and is very useful is women being informed and empowered by any means possible, by other women's groups, by small events like the festival that was in Athens 3 days ago, by giving them the self-confidence to take decisions for themselves.
So activate the real energy that comes from real people who care because it is their real lives. Yes.
Yes, I think that's the only possibility. And maybe that was always been the only possibility, because if you expect some higher authority to take care of you, well, no, it will not happen.
Yeah.
So it's all these small moves, and some of them are scientific research. It's obviously very important because you have then you have a solid background to for activism or for personal action. This is what I did. I covered all the research on birth, on home birth, and then I had a home birth.
Right. So let's finish this with a message to all these um, awakened activists or advocates for a healthier society for ourselves and our children and grandchildren. What would your message be to them?
If you're talking about children, I don't know, women who are the childbearing age, message. The most important thing is to believe in themselves.
Believe in yourself.
But you have to phrase it in different ways to make it sound more scientific. But I think that's the core of it. If you believe in yourself, you will have the relationships you want, the kind of birth you want, the kind of child raising you want, and then the child will be self-confident and happier.
So great message, great message. Connect with the trust of who you are and what you live for, a woman or a person in general, mother or father. That is perfect. And also, in a way, a little bit sad because it implies that we are not at that position yet, or at least as the majority of us have not are not connected with this inner power. So we give our power to other groups, other populations, and they can do whatever they like with this power we give them.
Yep.
So,
Having said all this, I'm very proud and hopeful for my children, mostly one of my daughters, who seems to have absorbed all these, the power of giving birth naturally, the power of you get from when others trust you. Because this is what I did. I trusted the process. I trusted her when she was a fetus, when she wanted to give birth, be born. Trusted her in breastfeeding. Trusted her, with the guidance occasionally. And she has become the most self-confident and kind person I could hope for.
right. Great. Is there anything else you would like to add before we bring this to a closure, Myrto?
Um, I don't really know. I have been a research person for many, many years, and I think it's time for implementation because when you get to cool the sack if you keep on researching and researching the same things. You get more details, obviously, but I think it has to interact with implementation to get a bit forward. And then the other problems, obviously, how you converse with policymakers and stakeholders, and yeah.
Time for action.
Yeah.
Research is good. Putting the research findings into action and creating change for progress and change. This is the next step. Thank you, Myrto, for this short-term, high-impact discussion.
Thank you for inviting me into that and giving me the chance to talk about it.